many of you work for distribution companies? Okay, good, you're in the right place. How many of you, at least on a weekly basis, use ChatGPT or Copilot or some other AI just for your own personal use? Okay, on a weekly basis. How many of you have ever tried to use ChatGPT or any sort of AI for your own personal use? Okay. Now, what about in your organizations? How many of you have formally introduced some sort of AI capability, even if it's just a beta pilot or on a small scale? How many of you tried something with AI? Do you mind sharing, just without revealing confidential information, like what functional area are you using it for?
So we've just started testing with like the paid subscription in ChatGPT.
Okay.
And then also I was working on an item recommendation app, which apparently you guys have already covered.
Right. Right. How about, does anyone else want to share an example of where they've used it?
Yeah, I use ChatGPT with an API. They submit customer POs in there to use that to extract all the data out, and then they use UiPath to put the data in each one.
Oh, okay. Okay. So some good examples. I mean, some good ways, and that's what I love about AI and this whole trend right now, is that there's so many little micro use cases you could be using, but there's also like a million of them in every organization. There's so many ways you could be using AI. So it can get pretty overwhelming, and for a lot of us, we're just trying to fully understand AI, and you think about all the options, it's almost overwhelming. So what I want to do today is talk about all the opportunities and the options, but really narrow it down and hone it down to more of an actionable set of next steps, which is what I'll end the presentation with. But along the way, I also want to talk about how exactly organizations are starting to use AI, even on a small scale, so that we can start thinking about how we might deploy AI capabilities within our organizations. So just a real quick overview of what we'll cover here today. I'm going to, first of all, give a quick introduction to me and my background. I'll talk about a quick overview and history of AI, what it is and how it's evolved here in recent years. I'll talk a little bit about the benefits and opportunities of AI in general, and then I want to shift gears and get more tactical and talk about how AI is being used in ERP systems. And after that, I'll talk more specifically about how Epicor is building AI capabilities into their software. I would say every software vendor we work with and have been involved with implementing their solutions, literally all of them are investing heavily in AI. So there's a lot of AI things that are constantly changing and evolving every day. And so we'll talk about how Epicor is building AI into some of their products. We'll talk about how to manage change and the human impact of AI, which is something that I don't think we fully understand at this point, but it's something we do have to be aware of. And then I'll also talk about the challenges and ethical considerations, along with a framework that I'll share with you on how to move forward, some next steps to get started. The very last slide I share with you will be sort of a digital strategy framework that you can use to start embedding not just AI, but any sort of ERP or enterprise application roadmap you might be trying to define. And then if you have questions along the way, especially with a smaller group here, please just raise your hand. I'll stop and answer them. It's actually more interactive and interesting that way rather than me waiting till the end. So please stop me at any point and ask questions as we're going here. So real quick overview of me though, before we get started. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage. Third Stage is an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm. So we help clients select and implement different types of ERP systems. We're not affiliated with Epicor, and we're also not affiliated with any other software vendor out there. And I've been doing this for 25 years now. I started my career at Price Waterhouse in the late 90s. Ironically, I hated the idea of becoming an ERP consultant. I had no desire to become one, and now I've done it my entire career, and I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't an ERP consultant. But when I was the young, naive 24-year-old coming out of grad school, I thought I'd be a strategy, supply chain, operational type of consultant. And so when they told me I had to go get certified in SAP and do big SAP implementations, I resisted that, and I didn't have much of a choice because I was the rookie, and it turns out rookies don't have much say in big consulting firms, nor do many other people in many cases. But so I did get certified, but then I learned over time that actually knowing technology the way I was trained early on and combining that with my MBA and just business understanding was a really powerful combination. And so I'm glad I did it, and now I love what I do, and I wouldn't do anything different. In fact, I kid about what I would do if this space didn't exist. I'd probably just be an Uber driver. I think is probably what I do, but that's a whole nother topic for another time. In 2005, I started a company called Panorama Consulting, which was also an independent consulting firm. I started that company in 2005, ran it until 2018. left that company and started Third Stage in 2018. And as I mentioned, we're independent and tech agnostic. We do a lot of implementation work, not just for AI, but also ERP and CRM, HCM, and other types of technologies. So to start, let's talk about the history and understanding of AI. How many of you, first of all, how many of you would say you understand AI pretty well, even after this conference? Do you? Okay. Have any of you been to a session here yet where the AI has not been talked about? I'm just curious. Oh, okay. I'm surprised because I have not. I was saying in the last session, I don't think I've gone more than 3 or 5 minutes in any session without hearing just the mention of AI. But there's a lot happening in the AI space right now. It's a really fun time. I think it's super exciting because so much is changing, and I don't recall a time in my career where technology grew and got adopted this fast. Even when Facebook came out and social media and all that stuff 20 years ago, it just didn't catch, it didn't feel like it caught on the same way, both in the consumer mainstream and in the business world all at the same time. It felt like it was a lot slower than this. And it's really cool. It's an exciting time, but it's also overwhelming. As I mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty around AI. In some cases, there's fear. In some cases, vendors are still trying to catch up with their cloud applications and the AI capabilities within it. They're nowhere close to fully mastering how AI is going to fully be baked into their products. They're getting there. They're doing a lot, and they're moving fast, but there's a lot more that we haven't seen yet that we have still yet to see in the next few years. But despite that, it turns out AI has been around for a long time. If you've been using Facebook, all along you've been using AI, whether you knew it or not. If you've been shopping on e-commerce like Amazon, you've been influenced or you've been impacted by AI. The thing that's different now, though, is that rather than AI being some sort of competitive advantage that only Amazon has or only Facebook has, and rather than it being on the back end that sort of happens behind the scenes, now AI is suddenly a tool set that all of us can access. We can all go to ChatGPT and use AI right now. We could go to ChatGPT and try to get similar recommendations as what Amazon might tell us if we were to go shop on Amazon. We could get recommendations on who we should be friends with on Facebook. So there's ways that you could be using AI in ways that we never could before, even though it's been around forever. Machine learning is a component of AI, and machine learning has actually been around for a while too. That's something that Epicor and other ERP vendors have been investing in for a decade, maybe close to 10 years. They've been investing in machine learning to learn, for example, how to process invoices faster from an AP perspective. That's one example of how machine learning is learning what the norms are. It learns where the exceptions are and where it should kick out an invoice to a human for intervention. And all along the way, humans can obviously override AI at any time, or override the machine learning at any time. So machine learning's been there for a long time. AI's been around for a long time, but now we're seeing mass adoption of it and a hyper focus on it, which is the big difference here. And it's a lot more accessible too. I mentioned ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is the one to thank or to blame, depending on how you look at it, for all the buzz around AI. Because it was really once ChatGPT came out and caught fire and took the world by storm, that's where we all started to understand what AI was. And now, again, we're quickly adopting or changing from just using ChatGPT to use it as a glorified Google to now figuring out how can we use AI to actually materially change our businesses and change our lives. And then, one of the last things I'm going to come back to, the last point on this slide, is the ethical and social issues. So there are ethical considerations. There are dark sides to AI potentially that we probably don't fully understand yet, but they are things that we should be aware of because every technology comes with its risks and potential downsides as well. So I want to talk about the benefits and opportunities of AI. I'll start at a high level and I'll sort of work my way down to specific areas. But just at a high level, some of the categories of benefit we're seeing with AI and some of the possibilities with artificial intelligence. First of all, is providing a better work experience. So employees now being able to have access to data and access to tools that makes their job easier and allows them to do more. And less headaches that go along with gathering data and trying to find information that may not exist and trying to manipulate data, trying to understand what data means and being limited by human knowledge. Now we have AI tools that can augment human knowledge to make us smarter, to make us more effective, more productive, et cetera. It's also a way to provide a better customer experience. So now we can service customers better because we have the right products in the right time at the right place, which obviously is important. I imagine to most of you being distribution companies, you need to get the product there in a timely fashion based on whatever you've promised your customer. And AI is a way to give us tools to provide that better customer experience. AI can also be a way to better anticipate customer needs and that sort of thing, which is going to affect our entire supply chain and make us better at managing our supply chain, which is the next point. If we can predict demand better, that means we can predict all our freight and logistics better. We can predict our procurement needs better. We can predict our warehousing needs better. There's a lot of inventory management capabilities that come along with that. So supply chain management is something that in general, I think supply chain management has a huge amount of potential for AI to improve, especially complex global supply chains. And then the last two bullets you see here aren't related to distribution per se, but they're more societal benefits of AI and potential benefits. One that I'm excited about that I think will start to materialize very quickly is in the healthcare system. Because if you think about an industry that has tons of data and tons of human limitations, I'd say healthcare is probably one of them. And it's also highly fragmented too. So if we can take AI and use it as a way to take mass amounts of patient data and outcomes and diagnoses and things like that, now we can use that data to train AI models to anticipate health risks and to anticipate what the best treatment plan is for a patient that's not limited by human knowledge limitations. If you think about doctors in society, most of them are specialists that focus on one area, but there's not many doctors that understand the entire field of healthcare, nor should you expect them to. But AI is a way to provide and augment the specialized knowledge and maybe the fragmented knowledge that exists within our healthcare system. And then you look at other societal things like climate change and any other societal issues or concerns you might have on a personal level. AI could be a way to help drive better understanding and insights as to what we can be doing to make the world a better place. And I'm not here to suggest that AI is here to make the world a better place, but it could be one of the benefits of AI. But rather than talking about making the world a better place, let's talk about ERP systems for now. How is AI transforming and changing ERP systems? And these are a few of the ways that we're starting to see AI impact and improve the way ERP systems are designed, built, and deployed. One is just the whole relationship between AI and ERP. When you take ERP from being that system of record that Lisa and some of the other leaders talked about in yesterday's keynote, we're transitioning from this mindset of system of record to system of action, which I love that phrase because I think it's where we're at in the industry right now. And it's allowing us to take ERP from being a back office commodity, a necessary evil, a system we just have to have. Now we're combining it with something that's super strategic and actually unlocks the power of all that data and all those processes and all that automation we have within our ERP system. And if we could take AI, ERP, and add to that good data, that's even better. So if we can have that trifecta or that triangulation of those three things, AI, ERP, and good data, that could give us a unique competitive advantage. And this is a great time for us as leaders to not just catch up to our competition, but now get ahead and set the tone for how we want to use AI and technology to build competitive advantages. So that relationship between AI and ERP is a perfect symbiotic relationship, in my opinion, because there's so much potential there. And then again, data focus. I think data is not only key to AI, data is just key to understanding your business. It's key to your ERP system, but yet organizations really struggle with data. How many of you would say that you tend to struggle with data accuracy and access to data silos? How many of you have those challenges within your company? Okay. Which is probably why you're considering Epicor, or maybe you're implementing Epicor or some other ERP system, I imagine. So the data focus is not only to make us better at AI and to make the AI models work, because without without data, AI doesn't work. And so the good news is we have to have better data, and it's really shining a spotlight on the need for data cleanliness and data governance. And so organizations might be focused on data now because they know they need it for AI, but they should have been doing it all along, because in order to get value out of ERP and just run your business effectively, you need good data. So the good news is there's some unintended benefits here too, which is that it's just going to help us have better visibility into our organizations that we ideally would have always had. It also helps with employee efficiency and effectiveness too. So we're starting to see organizations that are able to be more efficient, more effective, and able to access information a lot easier than they were in the past. I know some of the systems we use internally at Third Stage, now I can just type in a question I have rather than going to the screen I need to go to, or rather than running a report. And I know a lot of ERP systems like Epicor have that they're starting to build that conversational AI piece to it, to where I don't have to go to a certain screen, I don't have to know where the data is, I just ask it what I need to know and it'll create whatever it is I need it to create. So that really sort of opens up the possibilities of what we can do as employees. The problem or the downside is we have to clarify and create a clear vision for what we want people in our organizations to be doing and how we want them to be using AI. So there's a certain amount of bottoms-up innovation that we could benefit from with AI, but we also need sort of a top-down vision of how we want to use AI, how we don't want to use AI, because there might be some cases where you just don't want certain data going into a public or an open AI model. And we have to set parameters for that, or else we're gonna run into problems. And then finally, I think, as I alluded to before, the value creation aspect and the benefits realization aspect of ERP systems is something that AI is really enabling, because now we've got this foundation in place of a core common set of processes and technologies within an ERP system like Epicor, but now we can finally access that. I mean, it's one thing to have that system of record, like Lisa mentioned and Steve mentioned in the keynotes yesterday, but it's another thing to actually get the value out of it, to get the insights, to be more efficient, to make better decisions, to better service our customer. That's where all the value is. So it's a great combination. I think the two technologies are colliding or integrated at a perfect time in our history here. So I want to ask more or chat more specifically about how AI is being used in some of the Epicor products that are out there right now. And rather than just talk pie in the sky, high level benefits, let's talk specifically about how some distributors throughout the world are starting to use Epicor and other ERP systems too for some of their improvements in capabilities. One that's top of mind for a lot of you, I imagine, is inventory forecasting. Do any of you here think that you're really good at forecasting? Like, how many of you would say you're an 8 or above out of 10, in your forecasting abilities? No one. How many of you say you're like a 5 or below? A couple of you. Rest of you are sort of between 5 and 8, maybe. You're okay. You're not terrible, but you're not killing it. How many of you fit in that space? Okay, so kind of a mix of results there. But AI is something that can really enable something that's very complicated and prone to error. I mean, I imagine the reason most of you are not rating yourselves higher isn't because you don't have good people, or isn't because you don't know what's important, or it's not because the business doesn't value it. It's probably because you don't have the right tools, and you don't have the data, maybe you don't have the knowledge, and there's human limitations that affect that. So AI allows us now to take mass amounts of data and learning and analysis that a human can't do, and it allows us to learn and refine over time in a way that humans can't do at that same scale. So inventory forecasting is one that Epicor, I know, is investing heavily in. We're starting to see some examples of where there are use cases for inventory forecasting. There's also AP automation, which actually has been around for a while. I think through machine learning, there's been some AP automation that's already been there, but now AI sort of fast tracks that whole process of reducing the manual intervention required for processing invoicing for payments. Financial planning and analysis, being able to better forecast revenue, which begins, by the way, with customer demand, but then being able to forecast revenue and budgets and P&L and cash flow and all that stuff. That's something that, again, is very data intensive, prone to error, it's prone to interpretation and things that humans are going to muck up with potential forecasts, but AI is a way for us to fine-tune that process. There's also predictive maintenance for trucks or your fleets, even if you have equipment out in the field, whatever it might be. There's abilities and ways that data can be used now to anticipate what equipment might need attention, what might need maintenance, or what equipment or what part of your fleet is prone to or likely to experience some sort of failure. So really recognizing and being able to analyze that using data, not just of your own data, but also data that's gathered from other parties as well, which, by the way, is the power of AI in the cloud, is that when you move to the cloud with Epicor or any other solution, you're not only getting the learnings from your own data models, but it's also learning from other distributors like you. Now you won't necessarily have a direct line of sight and understanding of what kind of orders your competitors are doing or what who their customers are, but you are unintentionally and indirectly benefiting from other distributors that are using Epicor in the cloud, because now the AI models can learn from those data sets that are being stored in the cloud, which is why so many organizations now have started to reach that tipping point of wanting to move to the cloud if they weren't already, because now you've got this additional reason, in addition to the other benefits of cloud that is a topic for another time, and I know it's been covered in this conference so far, but in addition to the core benefits that have always been there for cloud, now there's another reason or another benefit, which is to take advantage of AI to its full potential. you're going to benefit more by having a cloud solution that can process and access all that data at scale. There's also MRP, which is more of a manufacturing slide, so I'm showing you the wrong slide, I apologize. This is the part of the presentation that I tailored for today. So I won't talk about MRP for manufacturing, but I'll talk about last mile delivery optimization. So just being able to optimize shipments and deliveries to customers, and then that conversational aspect, the knowledge assistant aspect of some of Epicor's products is another groundbreaking way that I think vendors like Epicor are making AI more accessible and easier for people to access, because they can start to ask questions that they want answers to without necessarily having to know where to go look for something other than just ask the system itself. So this is all the upside and potential benefits and ways we're seeing AI being used by different organizations and distribution companies. But what about the people side of it? And I think we do have to think about the people side of it, because with any new technology, especially a new emerging technology, comes a certain amount of perceived fear and perceived risk. And with humans, I would say that for a lot of distribution companies, people have survived and proven their value within the organizations by having heroics and tribal knowledge. How many of you have that person in your organization or that group of people within your organization who've been there for 10 years or more, and they don't have good systems or tools or data in place, but they have created a patchwork of ways to get the job done? They've got a lot of tribal knowledge that no one else knows. It isn't documented anywhere, but they've been with the company so long, they know it so well that they can do it inside and out. How many of you have someone or multiple people that fit that profile in your organization? All right, so let's think about that person. If it's one person, or pick one of the people in your organizations that fit this. Imagine if you were to go to them and say, okay, I'm gonna give you AI, and it's gonna make your job so much easier now. Now you may not say these exact words, but what you might insinuate or suggest unintentionally is that now your tribal knowledge doesn't matter as much, and now AI is gonna do a big part of your job for you. And by the way, your heroics aren't as important now as they used to be, because now we've got a system that can do that for us. Probably good for the business, right? But it's probably a threat to me if I'm that person, because now it's like, well, what's my value then? If you don't value my heroics, you don't value my tribal knowledge as much as you used to, now you're automating a lot of my job, then what's my role here? What's my purpose? And the minute I start questioning my role and my purpose, the minute I'm gonna start kicking and screaming and pushing back and finding ways to avoid the change, even if it's okay, I might be on board with everyone else changing, but I don't wanna change myself because that's a threat to me. So you take that times however many people in your organization, you can see how suddenly you might have an opportunity of AI in front of you, but you're getting a bunch of pushback and resistance, not because it's a bad idea for the business, but because it's perceived to be a bad idea for some of the individuals in the organization. So we have to be mindful of that and just assume that there's going to be a resistance to AI, even though it's probably for the best, and there's probably a lot of upside potential within your organizations. You're still going to see resistance, and we have to assume that, despite the potential. So we have to plan for it. We have to build a change strategy that educates people and helps them become more comfortable with AI and help them understand what their new job and roles and responsibilities and expectations are in a post-AI world. And then, of course, people are always going to worry if AI is going to take their jobs. How many of you think that you will use AI to cut headcount in some way in your organization? Okay, it's actually a fair number. How many of you think you'll use it as a way to not have to hire as many people as you grow? Okay, so it is going to affect headcount, right, in some way, either directly because we cut heads or indirectly because we just don't hire as much as we might have otherwise without it. And so, again, good for the business, but what does that do to the average employee? How do they perceive that? Especially for those of you that said you might cut heads. The minute you cut one person because of AI, that spreads like wildfire, and that becomes the fear of the organization. Even if you've got 10,000 people, but you laid off one because of AI, it becomes a fear. It doesn't help that in the news we hear about Facebook and Google and Salesforce, some of these big tech companies that have recently announced big layoffs, and they've said it's because largely of AI and the efficiency gains that they're expecting from AI. So we as a human race are hearing it already. We're hearing heads getting cut, people are losing jobs over AI. So when we start talking about AI in our organizations, it's natural that we're gonna start to wonder, does this mean we're gonna cut heads? And when you take away my heroics and tribal knowledge, does that mean I'm up next? So we just have to be aware of that. We have to plan for it. If we are gonna cut heads, we need to just be aware that that's gonna result in some backlash. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but there's a change management implication there that takes a lot of finesse and focus throughout the transformation. So some of the challenges and ethical considerations, I grew up in the 80s, so I love the dark, dystopian, draconian sorts of stuff like Terminator was one of my favorite movies. One of my 2 favorite books is still 1984 by George Orwell. So I tend to have this bias towards dystopian, dark stuff on a personal level. But it's interesting to see how AI is sort of evolving in a similar way, or there's some similarities with what we see or saw in some of the predictions or things that were emerging in the 80s or even further back. And I think that's what we have to be aware of, is there's this fear that AI will take our jobs. There's this fear that AI will make us obsolete as humans. It'll make our intelligence less important. And what I would say is that it's probably actually going to make you smarter. I feel smarter when I use AI. Like, I just have so much access to more stuff, and I can take an idea and a subset of knowledge that I have, and I can expand it like that without necessarily having to go learn a bunch of new skills. So, not everyone thinks that way, though. A lot of people are going to think that, well, you're trying to replace me and my value, and so we just have to be aware that there is going to be fear there, especially for people that are further along in their careers. Maybe they don't have as much comfort with technology as it is. Especially if you've got an old mainframe and they still have, transaction codes memorized in their heads. Now you start to introduce a cloud system with AI. I mean, that's just a huge jump for a lot of people. So you just have to be aware that the magnitude of change and the big leap we're making as organizations with AI and even other technologies. A lot of the stuff that Epicor has been showing throughout this conference is pretty advanced stuff that's probably a pretty big jump for a lot of you and for a lot of your employees. So we just have to be mindful of it and understand the human perspective. And then the last thing I'll mention too is we have to recognize that AI is not perfect. There's still biases. There's still something called hallucinations, which are basically inaccuracies that come from AI. If you go to ChatGPT and ask it a question, you have to remember it's going to give you what you want. It's going to give you a detailed analysis. It'll answer the question, but it's going to be based on inputs from the internet. And the internet's full of a lot of good stuff, but it's also full of a lot of garbage too. And AI is learning from that. And so it's going to take some time for it to learn what's true and what's not, and what's accurate and what's not, which also leads to how do we ensure that it's not biased? I try to, sometimes I'll go in there and try and trigger ChatGPT. I'll ask it questions like, who's better, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, or something like that, something very polarizing or something that's difficult to answer, just because I want to know, is it going to give me an opinion? Is it going to have a bias because someone behind the scenes put a safeguard in place to make sure it answers it a certain way, which they do, by the way, with ChatGPT. Because OpenAI is it started as a nonprofit, and it's a for-profit now, but the board that runs it is a nonprofit, and their governance the governance they have over OpenAI is to ensure that it doesn't harm society. And in the name of not harming society, then you start to get biases of, well, what harms society and what questions can or can't AI answer. So that's where the human bias kind of comes in. If we start to train AI to be biased because we're biased, then what does that mean for AI? So we just have to be aware that humans are still going to influence AI, and therefore it's going to be biased, it's going to be imperfect, and we just have to manage that. So the last point I'll cover here today is how do we move forward? What do we do? We've got all these options out there. We've got all these pie-in-the-sky utopian visions of what could be with AI. Well, we're not going to get there overnight. We're not going to become an AI-driven organization in the next week or month or year or years. It's an ongoing journey. But there are things we can start doing right now to get immediate value. One is going to be data readiness. So for those of you that answered the mixed results of your current data situation, it's a great excuse to move forward with cleaning up the data you have, because AI needs good data. It needs a lot of data. It needs a lot of quality data as well. We also have to make sure that we have a data-driven culture. So we're not just cleaning up the data, putting it in the system, training the AI model. We have to make sure that our culture changes to understand how important data is and how we affect data, and in some cases how we undermine the accuracy of the data unintentionally by some of the mistakes we make or some of the human errors. We have to find the right partner. So who's going to help us identify the right roadmap, help us through the transition, through the journey, not just with AI, but also for their ERP system. And this is where it might help to look beyond the traditional big name system integrators, because there's more innovative, more nimble companies out there. They're more on the cutting edge of technologies and have more of a broad view of the space. And shameless self-promotion, I think Third Stage Consulting is one of those options, the company I work for. But I admit I am biased because that's my company. But that is something we help our clients with, is not only AI strategy and implementation, but also ERP, CRM, and other systems. Strategic governance, so making sure we've got the right program management, the right governance around data, making sure we build processes and expectations and parameters around how we manage data and how AI is going to be used within our organization. I think probably the wrong answer would be to say, hey, let's go just have everyone start using ChatGPT to do whatever they want. That's probably not a good answer. It's a good way to spark some innovation potentially, but it's also going to spark a lot of problems of data privacy issues, confidentiality issues, too much dependency on AI and not enough human thought going into it. So we can't just throw it out there and say there's a tool, go use it, go figure it out. But what I typically suggest is that if you can start with a problem statement and try to figure out how could we use AI to solve this one problem, how can we try it out, how can we test some different things. That way you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting some innovation and experimentation, but you've put a box around it. You sort of isolated it as a test. And then once you figure things out, then you start to scale it out. You figure out a way to solve a problem, you get a couple people using it in their day-to-day jobs, you fine tune it, and then you can roll that same capability out to hundreds of people or whatever the case may be. So having that deliberate strategy, the governance in place is all really important. And then also just recognizing that there's a lot of different options out there. Obviously Epicor is investing a lot in AI. There's a lot of AI that they already are building in their system. So understanding not just what they have today, but what's on their roadmap and what's coming soon. And then what don't they have? If there's things where they don't have certain capabilities and there's other third-party systems that could augment Epicor or whatever system you're using, then go look at those. I mean, those are all things that open up a lot of options to you. And you can still use your ERP as your core, but then you can use AI selectively even outside the ERP system as well, integrating with the ERP system and your other systems as well. And then here's a slide. You're more than welcome to take a picture of it, or I can send you this whole deck after the fact. It'll be available, I think, on the app after the event as well. But this is a digital strategy roadmap that we use with our clients. So when we're helping clients just figure out what is your digital strategy, what kind of ERP system are you going to select and deploy, what kind of CRM, what kind of AI, what kind of supply chain solutions, whatever it is, we go through these different work streams to help them define that roadmap. And what you'll notice about this work stream is that it's not focused just on enterprise apps, which is the middle work stream. It's also focused on business process improvement, defining what that future state is. It's focused on the organizational change, defining what the change impact is, how we're going to change our culture, how we're going to design people's jobs. And again, that organizational design piece, I can't emphasize it enough because I think that's going to be probably the most critical part of AI being successful in your organization, is defining, once you've figured out how you're going to use AI in any given part of your business, then it's a matter of defining how people are going to do their jobs and how you're designing their roles and responsibilities, laying out a process for them, something that's repeatable, consistent, and not left up to chance. And that's going to really allow you to scale up your AI capabilities a lot faster if you can test it out at first, pilot some functions, document it, fine tune it, and then scale it out and roll it out to a broader population. I think that's going to be super powerful. So looking at all of your enterprise apps and how you're going to fit AI into it potentially is important. And then solution architecture, looking at how your systems tie together, how you're handling data. And then business intelligence and analytics, which is related to but different from AI, and making sure that you have insights and visibility into the organization and its performance. And then finally, project quality assurance is a last step in there, or sort of an underlying step that's important to keep the overall transformation on track. So that's all I've got for you today. One last thing I'll leave you with before I open it up to any questions you might have. If you scan this QR code right here, that's our resource center. There's a ton of information there, white papers, blogs. You can subscribe to my YouTube video or my YouTube channel on that page, or you can just go to YouTube and follow Eric Kimberling. I put out a lot of stuff about AI, but I also put out a lot of stuff about ERP. I put stuff out about Epicor, all kinds of ERP vendors. You can follow all that stuff there. You can also buy my book called The Final Countdown there. If you go to thefinalcountdown.com, that's my book. You can get on Amazon as well. So that'll be being said. What questions do you have? Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to dive into?
Maybe you could go a little deeper into how someone can go about uplifting their team's skills as you're switching from AI and their normal, heroics, as you call it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So how do you switch from their normal heroics to upskilling to AI? So if it were me, what I would suggest is I would give them a homework assignment and say, why don't you go home and just try out ChatGPT in your personal life? Like use it to, come up with whatever gift ideas for your kids or whatever. Like do research or start learning how AI can work and how you can engage with it. Start to create graphics, go experiment yourself and see what it can do. And then I would, after that homework is done, have that person or maybe a small group of people come back to the business and say, now let's think about how we could be using something like that in our businesses to make it better. And in sort of like art of the possible thinking, like what if we could use AI to do this or to analyze this or to create this output? And then have them come up with some ideas that you probably wouldn't think of on your own as a leader. Have them come up with some ideas and start to prioritize and start to test things, and then you can roll it out and scale it. So I think making people part of it and knowing that they don't necessarily need to go get trained in AI, they don't need to go get certified in it or become a data scientist overnight or anything like that. They can just go play with it, learn how it works, because I'm still learning every day I use it. I still learn something new about it, and that's probably going to continue for some time. So I think there's a lot to learn about it, just you can do it on your own, do it in your personal life. I wouldn't suggest do it in business, like go plug in a bunch of confidential information and see what you can do with AI with it. I would not do that, because you don't want them just running free reign with information sharing and that sort of thing. But once you sort of box it in and put some parameters around it, you try some things that work, then you can, they're learning by doing, and I think that's probably the best way to do it.
On the one hand, on the other hand, we have very limited data, so 7 months right now, P21 normalized data. What are your thoughts on that?
So the question is like, how much data do we bring over? How much history is important to bring over? And the way I would answer that is, first I would say it depends, but the way I would answer the it depends part is to create two options and quantify it. One would be if we were to take, say, 7 months worth of historic data, clean it up and move it over to the new system, how long would that take? And if it takes you more than 7 months, for example, well, then you could have been just capturing data in the AI model from scratch over those 7 months, and you may not get as much value out of that. But if it's something you can do relatively quickly and there's perceived value there, or there's tangible value in moving that data over, then you may do it. So I think it depends on how long and how much of an investment it is, and you've got to assess that against how much value do we get out of it versus starting from scratch potentially and teaching the AI model from scratch. Because if you have 7 months of data but it's all dirty and it's going to take you forever to clean it up and you don't have the resources.
Current data is very clean, right? Just since we went live with the companies were
The 7 months is clean?
very clean.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it's very
Yeah.
So you think just go forward then?
Yeah, maybe you take the 7 months at the very least, but then you look at, well, what would it take to clean up, anything before that, and then do kind of a cost benefit of what, is it worth that, or would we be better off just take the 7 months, it's a starting point, you can start building it clean on top of that. That might be the more cost-effective way, I don't know, until you do two scenarios side by side to compare the cost benefit. Yeah, we come up with different answers for different clients, so it's hard for me to say one over the other. Just, you have to look at the situation and compare the two.